Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramona, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with the Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I am so excited to have you join us today. We dedicated this podcast to exploring the idea of doing business and living life with a purpose, and that purpose being a servant's heart. If you approach your work, your lives that way, you're going to truly make a difference. We also developed this podcast to motivate you, inspire you, and educate you. And I want you to think about how you can serve today, not tomorrow, but serve today, and what impact you create today. Start with serving with yourself today, and great things will happen. While you listen to my great guest, incredible topic we're going to talk about, which is money. It's a big emotional topic, but we got some great answers for you. I want to thank Pantheon Alliance. Would you like to be part of an exclusive community of high-income, successful business owners and entrepreneurs from very diverse industries? Together, they're building a thought leader platform to impact and change the world. Impact and change, I talk about in the monologue before the show, and you heard all that. Well, my guest today is going to talk about money, and you know what? You're being told the wrong things about money. And he'll discuss this a little bit more, but I want to welcome Gary to the show.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you having me. And the thing that I love about you talking about working with Servant's Heart, I just want to let you know the best part of my week is when I get an email from one of my subscribers, from somebody who's part of my community, and they've made money in something that we've done together. And I get that message saying, hey, I invested in this with you and I made money in it. And my finances are more secure. My home is more secure. My life has less stress in it. When I get those emails from people, it makes me feel better than anything else, because we know that we've made a difference for somebody in their home at their kitchen table.
Let's use the financial term. That's a servant's heart ROI. Yeah, audience, he's not making money, but the universe changes. Or for me, God's universe changes. Good things will happen. You put out blessings and gifts will come back to you. Well, Gary, let's jump into a great conversation before the show about mistakes that people are told are making with their money, and talk about what we said. We're growing up. I'm 63 and we're around the same age. How we're, save money and you'll be fine.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Steve, it's not that it was bad advice and it was well-meaning, right? It made sense. You make a certain amount of money, you spend less than you make, and you save in dollars and you build wealth over time. And it's a good idea. And the people who told us that meant well, and it made sense. But unfortunately, it's no longer the case. You cannot save in dollars. And, I'm sure a lot of people like to talk in, very complicated finance terms, but it's actually really simple, right? For everybody who's listening to this, what's happened to your bills over the last 3-4 years? What's happened to your grocery bill, your rent, your housing payments, assuming you bought a house in the last few years? What's happened to your cost for food when you go out to eat? When you need help, if you have to hire a plumber or a handyman, everybody's expenses have gone up. Why? Right? What's happening? And the answer is inflation. Now, the original definition of inflation, and everybody stick with me, don't tune out. We're going to talk about economic history. I know, right? They're like, oh my God, this guy's fascinating, right? But the original definition of inflation was an increase in the money supply. So just do this simple thought experiment with me. If we have a certain amount of money and a certain amount of goods and services, and we don't change the amount of goods and services in the economy, but we increase the amount of money in the economy, what's the one thing that can adjust? It's prices. Prices go up. And over time, because it was embarrassing for the government to talk about the inflation rate as the increase in the money supply, they started to talk about inflation as an increase in prices. Now, you could say, well, wait, these are related, and they are closely related, but not exactly the same thing. One is a deliberate government action. The other is an indefinite reaction to that original action. Now, for the purposes of this conversation, I want to reframe the way we think about inflation. So everybody thinks about it now as an increase in prices. I'd want you to think about it as a decrease in purchasing power of your dollars. And the reason that matters is, let's say, at the end of the year, you have $1,000 saved up, and it's $1,000 in your savings account or your checking account, or you own a government bond, right? So you can buy a certain amount of goods and services today with that $1,000. So Steve, here's your first finance quiz for you, your first econ quiz.
Okay.
We get out a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you have that $1,000. You want to buy goods and services with it. Maybe you want to go on a trip. You want to buy an airline ticket, food at the grocery store, fuel for your car. Are you going to be able to buy more with that or less in the next year, 5 years?
A lot less.
So then my question for everybody is, what's happening, right? Why is that happening? Where is that purchasing power going? Everybody just thinks about it as, well, yeah, of course, prices go up over time. Okay. But if you have today a certain amount of purchasing power, and then a few years later, you have less purchasing power, where did it go? Is it being stolen? Did it just disappear? Did the universe disappear it? What's happening? And we should explain that to people, because people should understand, right? And then the next thing that we want to do is explain to people there are things you can do about it. And listen, for people who are struggling with this, where it feels like it's hard to get ahead, a lot of people that I talk to, they feel like they're being screwed. I'm sorry to use the, semi-vulgar language, but here's the truth. You are. And your money is being stolen from you in a very stealthy way by people who are hoping you won't notice. And that's why it feels hard to get ahead. This is exactly what's happening now. Just because it's not fair doesn't mean there's nothing you can do about it. And even though this is unfair and you are being screwed, it is still your responsibility to do something about it. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to walk you through the unpleasant truth of what's happening, but we're not black pill people here. At the end of this, I'd love to explain to people there are things that you can do to protect yourself from this or to make money from that. So how does that sound?
Sounds great.
All right. So the first thing that's happening is we've all looked at what's happened with government debt. Right? Everybody's aware that, we went through 30 trillion and then 33 trillion. As of today, it's about $36 trillion. Now, the reality is even worse than that. That's the on-balance sheet liabilities, the official debt of the US government right now, about $36 trillion. That's on a $27, $28 trillion economy. We've got a problem. But the real problem is even worse, because it doesn't count the off-balance sheet liabilities. Those are things like Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, pensions, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Those liabilities are over $200 trillion. The real liabilities of the US government are somewhere in the neighborhood of $250 billion. That cannot be paid, right? There's no, when people say, oh, well, the rich have to pay their fair share. Okay, great. It's really fun to gang up on the wealthy and the powerful. They don't have $250 billion.
No.
So that's not an option. But let's talk about what's happening. So, Steve, if we go back to when you and I were kids, the government tended to fund itself through taxes. Now, I don't like paying taxes. Do you like paying taxes?
No.
No, none of us do. But there is one advantage to funding the government through taxes. And the advantage of that is it forces people to take a hard look at what you are paying for the government that you're receiving. And so, if we go back 40, 50, 60 years, people would say, okay, well, we get to April 15th, I have to write a check to the government. It's a big check, it's a small check, but you would sit at your kitchen table and it would force you to say, this is what I'm paying and this is what we're receiving in government benefits. And it forced a real conversation about the proper size and scope of the government and how much we wanted to pay for that. And if you were happy with that, you might say, okay, great. I like what's happening now. Let's vote for a government that will continue these policies. But maybe you said, wow, I like what the government's doing, but not at this price. I want to rein it in. So you would vote for people who would tell you, yeah, we're going to reduce spending on these programs and live within a lower budget. And the advantage of that system is it forced us as the American people to confront what we were paying for the government and to match what we were comfortable spending with the services that we were receiving from the government. Now, Congress believes, so actually, let me go back a little bit. In 1971, President Nixon took us off the gold standard. It was a horrible decision that he had to make. Now, is it entirely Nixon's fault? No, the government was spending more money than we had gold to back it up. And so, France and other European countries were saying, send us the gold. And Fort Knox was being emptied out, and we didn't have enough gold to back all the dollars. And the reason for that was a gigantic increase in government spending that started really in the Johnson years, the Great Society. Now, some of you might be saying, but I like those programs, and it's fine if you do like those programs. But what I want you to understand is that there's a cost. These programs aren't free. And so, back in the 1970s, we tended to fund things, again, on a pay-as-you-go basis, and people would pay taxes, and that's how we would get there. Well, so now we get, 50 some years later, and where we are is Congress believes that they've discovered this brand new way to have guns, butter, bread, circuses, everything without paying for it. And that's just increasing debt. So if we go back just a couple of decades, Steve, what was a government compromise? A compromise between Team Red and Team Blue. And I don't care which you're on, but if, the compromise meant, okay, I'll get some of what I want, you get some of what you want, but we have to keep it reasonable. So my team, we're going to cut our spending on this, but you guys have to cut your spending on that thing that I don't like. I'm like, okay, I'll give you this, you get that, I'll cut this, you cut that, and you'd arrive at some sort of reasonable compromise, or hopefully reasonable compromise. Now the compromise is, okay, I'll get spending for everything I want, but we agree that you get spending for everything you want. And so we just end up with trillions and trillions and trillions of excess dollars. Now, what happens is Congress overspends. They're overspending right now by about $3 trillion a year. That's on balance sheet. If you want the off balance sheet numbers, you're going to need to double it. Again, this is a gigantic problem. When I talk about overspending, I mean government spending in excess over tax receipts, right? So they're not spending $3 trillion. They're overspending by $3 trillion. Now, then complicit in this dance is the Treasury Department. And Janet Yellen, who is the head of the Treasury, she's Secretary of the Treasury. I want you to know that when she was chair of the Federal Reserve, she said that her biggest regret was not creating more inflation. So anybody who says, oh, well, they didn't know, this was intentionally done. People are in power who said, we want to create more inflation. Okay, you can agree or disagree, but what we should not be debating is that this was done on purpose. So what they do is they monetize this debt. Now, fancy finance word, but don't worry, I'm going to explain it. That's just a fancy way of saying that they are going to increase the number of dollars outstanding by selling debt. So they sell treasury bonds and treasury bills every week and every month. Some, as short as 1 or 2 weeks, others as long as 30 years. And then we get cash from American citizens or foreigners, the rest of the world, foreign governments, and they send that cash in, and then the government spends that cash. Well, what does that do? That increases the money supply. All right. So the original definition of inflation is an increase in money supply. In this case, that increase in money supply without an increase in goods and services leads to higher prices. That's the only thing that can adjust. That leads to lower purchasing power for you. And that's why you can't save in dollars. That is why everything feels so hard. Our government is avoiding the tough choices about what do we want to fund and what do we not want to fund, and just saying we can do everything and don't worry, there's no cost. Well, there is a cost, right? And remember a few years ago when everyone got their stimmy checks? That was fun. Steve, did you get your $800 check or your $1,600?
Oh, yeah.
Did you like getting that?
Sure.
Yeah, it feels good. Hey, we got free money. We like free money, right?
Yep.
Anyone want to guess who paid for the stimmies? Steve, who do you think paid for the stimmies? We did.
I paid for my own.
That's right. So, maybe you got a check for $800 or $1,200 or $1,600. But if your monthly expenses went up by $100 or $200 a month, you were paying an extra $1,200 to $2,400 per year in perpetuity every year. You are paying for your stimmies. There's no free money, right? And so that's really the issue. And I want to be clear. This is not a partisan issue. Team Red overspends, Team Blue overspends. Both parties are complicit in this. And every presidential administration and every Congress spends more than the one before it. We have seen in my lifetime every combination of Republican or Democratic control of the White House and Congress, split Congress, the same party as the White House, different party as the White House. We've seen all of that. But the one constant, no matter who is in power in Washington, no matter how much power they have, whether how unified or divided the government is, what happens to spending over time? It always increases, right?
Yeah.
So
what's the solution?
Well, the solution is not politically viable. The solution is we need to cut spending by an enormous amount. And by the way, this is we've hit emergency levels. It's not just the debt and inflation that are these issues. When we take a look, more than 100% of GDP is coming from increases in government spending. And what that means is that the real productive economy, all of the businesses that the people in this audience own and run, right? That is being crowded out by an increase in government spending. That part of the economy is actually shrinking, and shrinking. Sorry,
yeah, exactly.
Right?
Just on Halloween. Yeah,
exactly. And so that government spending is pushing out the productive private economy. So the government needs to cut spending immediately. Now, that's not going to happen. There is literally nobody who ran for office who's even thinking about cutting spending. We had an election on Tuesday. There were lots of reasons to vote for your candidate. You had good reasons for voting for your person, but cutting spending wasn't going to be one of them. So everybody who ran for office was dedicated to spending more. The other thing that needs to happen, and it is not politically viable, is we need to revise the social contract. And I know that's unpopular. People don't want to hear it. But if we have off-balance sheet liabilities, pension liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security of $200 trillion, that it can't be paid. There's no amount that we can tax the rich. There's no amount that we can destroy the middle class that will pay for that. So that's what should happen. It's not going to happen. What will happen is a story that is as old as money itself. So again, right, nobody turned this off yet. We're going to talk about economic history. I know, really exciting stuff. But if we go back through history, every empire, every reserve currency has ended in the same way, with overexpansion, war, debt, and a debasement of the money supply. Even if we go back to ancient Rome, we go back a couple thousand years, what they would do is they would take their currency, and first, the Roman coins were made out of silver, and then they were made out of 80% silver, and then 50% silver, and then 20% silver. And they kept cutting that, debasing the currency. We saw the same thing happen with Spain, with Great Britain, and now we're seeing it here in the United States. And, back in ancient Rome, they simply put less precious metal in the money, debasing the monetary supply. Here, we don't have that. Our currency is back. Actually, here's a good question. The US dollar used to be backed by gold. Steve, any guess what backs the US dollar right now?
I have no idea.
So your dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the government. So
Jeez.
we are counting on the credit of an organization that is $250 billion in debt, shattering all prior records. And, all I would say is faith is better placed in other places. Take it to the clergy person of your choice. It's your local synagogue, your church, whatever, there are proper places to put faith, but it is not the government.
Yeah. Let's talk about, we're getting to the end here.
All right.
Talk about your learning platform that you have out there for people, that you give them education and give them really good tools to help with their finances.
So at Deep Knowledge Investing, we work with hedge funds, family offices, registered investment advisors, and individuals. Some individuals, even just with a few tens of thousands of dollars in an E-Trade account or a Schwab account, and we help people get better returns in the stock market. Now, the primary way that I do that is with individual stock picks. I've been a hedge fund manager and a stock picker my whole life. And in the 5 years I've been running the firm, we have more positions that have gone up by 100% or more than we have positions where we've lost money. So it's a very effective methodology that we use. But there are other things that we do to protect people from the kinds of unfair inflation that we're talking about. And there are lots of things that you can do. And as much as I've laid out a really bleak picture, you can do things like, first of all, at the really low end, if someone says, hey, wait, I'm having trouble making ends meet. All right, well, food security would be the place to go. And if I'm wrong on this, right, then you have extra tuna fish from Costco. It'll be fine, right? More rice and beans that you need. But in a bad situation, that's the thing that will make you secure. The next level above that, things like gold and Bitcoin will hold their level because they're hard. And in the case, what we mean when we talk about hard is difficult to replicate, right? Is someone, in Congress pushes or the Treasury Department pushes a button and there's another $1 trillion of spending. But, the inflation rate on gold, the supply of gold increases by about 1.5% a year. Bitcoin is even harder and is capped, right? And so, we also think about things like energy trades. And we own oil and uranium and energy infrastructure. The world is going to need more energy. For those of you who want to be driving electric vehicles, where's that power going to come from, right? But more importantly, energy tends to be priced in US dollars. Well, if the dollar is being debased and the value of the dollar is going down, what happens to the value of the energy that you own, right? These are great ways to protect yourself. Another way to think about it is if you get angry when you go to the gas station and you fill your pump, fill up your car at the pump and it's $70, $80, and you say, this is crazy. Well, then own these companies and sell the gas to yourself, right? Yeah. Sell the oil to yourself. At the high end of this, we work with people on individual stock picks. And I think there are two things that we have working to our advantage. One is I'm very well advised. We have an incredible board of advisors, and I've been a really good stock picker my whole life. The other is our current recommendations, our recommended portfolio. That's what I own. I own every position in the portfolio. I never say to somebody, oh, well, you should buy this stock or own this asset and don't have exposure myself. I have my capital invested alongside every one of Deep Knowledge Investing subscribers and partners. And so, in my business, it's called eating home cooking. If I'm right, we all succeed together. And the penalty for being wrong isn't just that I feel horrible that something hasn't worked out for our subscribers, but my portfolio takes the same hit as theirs.
Yeah, I love that. So we're coming to the end here. How could people get the link? What's the link for the subscription?
Oh, if you go to deepknowledgeinvesting.com, there's a subscribe now button, right on the homepage, and click that. We do have a free subscription tier, if you want to get a sense of the kind of writing and macroeconomic views we have. But, the way that we help people make money for that, and to have access to the ideas and the research and the full portfolio, for that, we have subscription tiers. And Steve, I'm happy to let you and your viewers know we'll be offering a coupon code that they can use. If they're coming from you, they'll get a discount on their first subscription order.
And I believe podcast 25 is the coupon they're going to use. This will be out probably 3 days later, so it should be available and active. If not, and it's not ready, just go back 24 hours later and it'll be active. Don't sign up yet, but if it's not ready, use that code. Gary, I want to thank you so much. I learned so much today about finances. I'm fired up now. I think there's hope. And that's what I love about you, is your servant's heart gives us hope and faith. And that's what we need. Even though all this crap is happening, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's the most important thing.
Well,
and audience, that. Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome. This is great. And me and Gary want to thank you all so much for watching and listening to this podcast. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Doing Business with the Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.